The stars outside the observation deck stretched like glistening jewels scattered on black velvet, each representing an unknown, unexplored fragment of the universe. But to Captain Alex Marlowe, those stars felt more like a battleground than a mystery. Humanity's future was tethered to the expanse beyond, and it had been a constant battle to stake a claim in a galaxy filled with ancient, unfathomable forces. Alex stood by the window, his hands resting against the cold metal of the ship's frame, eyes scanning the void. The USS Valhalla was far from Earth now, its engines humming, a constant reminder of the distance they had covered. This was no longer just a reconnaissance mission. It was a test of human tenacity. Behind him, Lieutenant Sarah Diaz worked furiously at her station. Her fingers danced over the touchscreen controls, tracking the path of their ship as it ventured into uncharted Zathorian territory. There was tension in the air, palpable, thick, like the moment before a storm. Breaks. The crew had heard whispers of the Zathorians, an alien empire so vast, so powerful, that no species dared challenge their might. They were the dominant force in this corner of the galaxy, and Earth was barely a speck on their radar. But it had been 5 years since the first encounter, and now humanity was no longer content to cower in the shadows of these galactic behemoths. "Captain," Sarah's voice was calm but tinged with concern. "We've received the transmission." Alex's chest tightened. The Zathorians had issued their ultimatum: leave their territory or face annihilation. No grand declarations. No threats beyond the cold, indifferent facts. Humanity was insignificant to them, nothing more than a minor nuisance to be extinguished. "Prepare the crew. We'll make our stand here," Alex said, his voice low, resolute. He turned away from the window, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. It was in humanity's nature to fight, to adapt, to survive, no matter the odds. And this time the Zathorians would learn that the hard way. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She had been by his side for years, through thick and thin, and she knew the fire that burned within him. "You don't think they'll respond to diplomacy, sir?" "Diplomacy?" Alex's lip curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of humor. "They've already made their judgment. If they can't grasp our tenacity, then it's their loss." As Sarah began relaying the orders to the crew, Alex couldn't help but reflect on what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with beings far older and more powerful. His crew, his people, they had always been underestimated, but that was a part of their strength. Humanity had survived when others had failed, not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they refused to bend, refused to die quietly. Every challenge, every setback, only pushed them further. The Zathorians, for all their technological superiority, lacked one thing that humans possessed in abundance: a relentless will to survive. The briefing room was filled with a tense, simmering energy as the officers of the Valhalla gathered around the table. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound, an ever-present reminder of the situation at hand. Alex stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back as he addressed his crew. "We've all heard the Zathorian message," Alex began, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "They don't understand us. They think that because we're young, in the galactic scale, that we're weak. They think we'll bow to their threats." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. His officers, a mixture of seasoned veterans and fresh faces, met his eyes without flinching. The fear was there. Everyone felt it, but it was tempered by something stronger, a quiet resolve. "We're going to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity," Alex continued. "We may not have their technology, but we have something they'll never understand. We have tenacity." Lieutenant Diaz stood beside him, the strategy hologram flickering to life before them. "We can't fight them head-on. They're too advanced. But we can outsmart them. We'll use everything they don't expect. Guerrilla tactics, misdirection, surprise. We've got one shot at this," Alex added, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. "And we're taking it." The crew murmured their agreement, ready to take the next step into the unknown. into a confrontation with an enemy that had never been challenged before. The stakes were impossibly high, but in the depths of the cold, uncaring universe, humanity had only one choice: fight or perish. The ship moved deeper into Zathorian space, the stars growing distant and cold as they entered the outer rim of the contested sector. The Zathorian presence here was immense, a network of ships and stations that stretched across light years. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had encountered, impossibly advanced, terrifying in its scope. Then, without warning, the calm silence of space was shattered by a sharp burst of energy. A Zathorian ship unlike any humanity had seen materialized in their path. The Zathorian flagship, a sleek, obsidian beast, its hull rippling with energy, bore down on the Valhalla. Its weaponry hummed with a terrible power, and the human crew's hearts pounded in their chests. The Zathorian commander's voice crackled through the communication channels. "Human vessel, you have trespassed into our domain. Leave now or face extinction." Alex stood firm, his fingers gripping the sides of the command chair. "We're not going anywhere." The transmission cut off abruptly, and the first volley of weapons fired. The Valhalla rocked as it was struck, the shields flaring to life, but it was clear. This battle was not one they could win outright. "Brace for impact," Alex ordered, his voice calm but carrying a weight of experience. "We will fight with everything we have." In the back of the room, Sarah's mind raced. The Zathorians had never fought a species like humanity, and that was their greatest mistake. They had no idea what humans were capable of when backed into a corner. As the Zathorian warship advanced, its energy beams cutting through the vacuum, Alex's crew fought with a ferocity born from the depths of human will. They didn't have the firepower to match the Zathorians, but they had something far more valuable: ingenuity. The Valhalla darted between asteroid fields, using the debris to shield themselves from incoming fire. They set traps, created false signals, and forced the Zathorians to waste their firepower. The Zathorian flagship was momentarily confused by the humans' unpredictable tactics, their arrogance clouding their judgment. "Keep them guessing," Alex said, his voice like a commandment, his eyes sharp with purpose. "Every time they think they've got us, we'll hit them harder." And they did. Every blow, every calculated risk, showed the Zathorians just how far humanity would go to survive. For the Zathorians, this was a fight they could never have imagined. For humans, it was just another test of their boundless will to persist, no matter the cost. As the Valhalla continued to maneuver through the deadly terrain, Alex's thoughts lingered on one question: how long could they keep this up? The Zathorians were relentless, their firepower overwhelming. But humanity's resilience was something that couldn't be measured by the usual metrics. They weren't the biggest or the strongest or the most advanced. But their ability to adapt, to turn every challenge into an opportunity, made them a force unlike any other. And that was something the Zathorians would soon discover, the hard way. The scene shifted as the tension of the encounter deepened. Alex's resolve was unwavering, but the crew knew time was running out. The Zathorians were regrouping, preparing for their final strike. The question was no longer if they could survive, but how they could turn the tide. For the first time in his life, Alex realized that this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for everything humanity stood for: ingenuity, adaptability, and a refusal to surrender. This was their moment to prove that no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever crush the spirit of humanity. And with that, the Valhalla surged forward into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. The Zathorian flagship loomed in the distance, its massive form a dark shadow against the stars. The ship was like nothing humanity had ever seen. Sleek, obsidian black, a monolith of alien technology, humming with an almost imperceptible, menacing energy. The Valhalla was dwarfed in comparison, but the humans aboard had faced far worse odds in their past. This was just another challenge to overcome. Inside the bridge, the hum of machinery seemed to intensify, echoing in Alex's ears as his crew moved in perfect synchrony, each person doing their part, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. Alex, standing tall at the helm, scanned the vast space ahead, his hand tightening around the rail. "Commander, they're transmitting again," Sarah said, her voice steady, but there was a hard edge to it. The alien ship's weapons had powered up, and the faint whine of their shields growing more intense was a signal that a fight was about to break out. "Put it through," Alex ordered. The cold, metallic voice of the Zathorian commander came over the comms, reverberating with an arrogance that made the hairs on the back of Alex's neck stand up. "Human vessel, your presence is a violation of our sovereignty. Leave now, or be destroyed." The ultimatum hung in the air like a dark cloud. It was a message of finality, an expectation that humanity would cower or comply. The Zathorians had dealt with countless species, crushed them beneath their boot, and their approach was the same every time: overwhelming force, followed by extinction. Alex felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. A part of him wanted to laugh. The Zathorians had no idea what they were up against. Humanity wasn't just any species. They had survived wars, cataclysms, extinction-level events. They didn't know how to surrender. They didn't know how to give up. "We're not going anywhere," Alex responded, his voice as calm and steady as he could make it despite the pounding of his heart. "We'll fight you with everything we have." For a moment there was silence on the other end, as if the Zathorian commander was processing this bold defiance. But then, the cold, unflinching voice returned. "So be it. Prepare to be obliterated." The comms cut out, and the next moment, the Valhalla rocked violently as the first of many powerful energy beams slammed into its shields. Alex gripped the edge of his command chair, feeling the force of the strike vibrate through the ship. The lights flickered, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. The Zathorians had fired first. "Shields holding at 65%, shouted Sarah from her station. She was already calculating their next move, her eyes scanning the console for weaknesses in the alien ship's movements. "Divert power to the engines. We need to stay mobile," Alex barked. "Get us moving. Keep them guessing." The Valhalla shifted, its engines firing at full throttle as the human crew sprang into action. The Zathorians were far faster than they had anticipated, their ship nearly a shadow in the dark. But Alex had a plan. He had to keep them on the defensive, use their overconfidence against them. The Zathorians had made one fatal mistake. They thought humanity was weak, incapable of standing up to them. They didn't understand that humans didn't fight for power or glory. They fought to survive. It wasn't about winning. It was about not giving up. It was about refusing to let the universe decide your fate. "Prepare to engage," Alex said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. "I want them to feel every shot. We fight back, now." They were outmatched. They were outgunned. But humanity had something the Zathorians would never understand. The battle had just begun, and Alex Marlowe, the stubborn human captain, was ready to prove it. As the Valhalla shifted into a new position, weaving between asteroids, Sarah's mind raced. Her fingers moved over the controls with practiced speed. The Zathorians were relentless, but they were arrogant. They thought they could crush humanity easily without even a second thought. They didn't understand how far a species would go when survival was the only thing that mattered. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice low but urgent, "they're underestimating us. They think we're just a nuisance. But we can turn that against them. They're going to expect us to flee, to run. But we're not running. We're fighting back, and we're going to do it on our terms." Alex nodded sharply. He trusted Sarah with his life. She had been through countless battles with him, each one teaching them both something new about their enemies and about themselves. But this was different. This wasn't just about outmaneuvering an opponent. This was about proving to an entire galaxy that humanity wouldn't back down. The Zathorians were relentless in their pursuit, firing barrage after barrage at the Valhalla. But each time the human crew used their resourcefulness to stay ahead. The ship darted through the asteroid field, the debris offering a natural shield as they prepared to launch their counterattack. "We're not just going to survive," Alex muttered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. "We're going to make them regret ever underestimating us." The first missile salvo from the Valhalla erupted, streaking toward the Zathorian flagship. For a moment it looked like the Zathorians might be able to dodge, but then, bam! The explosion rocked the flagship's shields, causing them to flare up in violent waves. It was a small victory, barely a scratch against their superior armor, but it was enough to send a message. Humans would never stop fighting. Every blow, every calculated risk was a reminder to the Zathorians that they had underestimated the wrong species. "We've got their attention," Sarah said, a grim smile forming on her lips. "They're not laughing anymore." But even as the words left her mouth, Alex knew they were only beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. The Zathorians wouldn't just let them go. They were going to throw everything they had at the Valhalla, and it was up to the human crew to adapt, to overcome, and to fight on. The battle was far from over. As the Valhalla continued to weave through the asteroid field, Alex couldn't help but think back on the Zathorian message. They had assumed humanity would cower in the face of their threat. They thought humans would be easy to dismiss, but they didn't understand humanity's greatest strength: tenacity. And as Alex gripped the command chair, feeling the power of the ship thrumming beneath him, he knew the Zathorians would soon learn that lesson, the hard way. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for everything humanity stood for. And no alien empire, no matter how powerful, would ever take that from them. The Valhalla danced through the stars, darting and weaving in an intricate dance of survival. The Zathorian flagship loomed behind them, relentless in its pursuit. Yet every move the humans made seemed to throw the aliens off balance. The tactics that the Zathorians relied on, sheer firepower and overwhelming force, had no answer for the unpredictable nature of humanity's fight. Captain Alex Marlowe stood at the command center, staring out into the vast darkness. The Zathorians were pressing forward, but their arrogance had become their greatest flaw. They underestimated human resolve. It wasn't about superior technology or firepower. It was about outlasting the enemy, about proving that no matter how hard the universe pressed against them, humans would never break. "We need to keep them on the defensive," Sarah Diaz said, her fingers moving rapidly across the console. "They're adapting to our tactics, but we're staying one step ahead. For now." "For now," Alex repeated under his breath, watching the Zathorian warship in the distance. "But how long can we keep this up? They have far more resources than we do." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was analyzing the situation, her mind working through the hundreds of variables at play. The Zathorians were smart, ruthless, but their pride was their weakness, and Alex was counting on it. "We need to go on the offensive," Sarah finally said. "We've got one shot to really hit them where it hurts, before they get wise to us." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What do you have in mind?" Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up a schematic of the Zathorian ship's outer defenses. "Their shields are strong, but not impenetrable. If we can bypass their outer layer..." "How?" "There's an opening on their ventral side, near the engine core," she explained, tapping a spot on the map. "We can send a small boarding party through a breach there, disable their engines, and make them vulnerable to a full assault." The risk was immense. A small team boarding the Zathorian flagship was a suicide mission, but it was a chance they couldn't ignore. Humanity's only hope lay in doing the unexpected, in exploiting every opportunity, no matter how small. "We'll need volunteers," Alex said, turning to the officers behind him. His voice was steel. "And they'll need to be ready for anything. We strike fast and we strike hard." The Valhalla circled the Zathorian flagship, using the asteroids to hide its movements. The crew had worked quickly, developing a strategy that relied on speed and precision. They would go in with a small team, move silently through the ship, and disable the engine systems before the Zathorians realized what was happening. As the boarding party prepared, Alex found himself face to face with the crew that would risk everything. Lieutenant Diaz stood next to him, and behind her a handful of soldiers, brave souls who had volunteered to make the impossible leap into enemy territory. "You know the stakes," Alex said to them, his voice resolute but carrying an undercurrent of the weight they all felt. "This mission is a gamble. One mistake and you're done. "We've got this, Captain," Lieutenant Diaz replied, her eyes filled with quiet confidence. "We know how to handle ourselves, and we know what's at stake. Humanity doesn't give up." "Good," Alex said, gripping her shoulder. "Then go. Do what you do best." The boarding team suited up, their faces tense, their eyes filled with determination. There was no fear in their movements, only the deep understanding that this mission would either lead to their victory or their death. The Valhalla shifted into position, aligning itself perfectly with the Zathorian flagship's weakened flank. In the vacuum of space, they would have no way of knowing what hit them until it was too late. The boarding party, now aboard a sleek shuttle, was prepared to make the dangerous jump into enemy territory. "Ready, Captain," Sarah reported from the bridge. She was watching the status of the boarding team as they moved closer to the Zathorian flagship. The shuttle was cloaked, but they couldn't afford to waste time. The Zathorians would be expecting an assault soon. Alex stood by the view screen, watching as the shuttle neared the Zathorian ship. His heart was pounding in his chest, not because of the fight ahead, but because he knew the lives of the crew depended on this decision. It was a brutal, necessary gamble, and every piece of humanity's future rested on it. The shuttle docked, with the Zathorian ship's underbelly, a loud, jarring sound echoing through the hull. The docking was instantaneous, and the team poured out in full combat gear, moving with practiced precision. The corridors of the Zathorian flagship were alien, sterile, and imposing. The walls were lined with strange metal that hummed with an energy they didn't yet understand. As they moved deeper into the belly of the ship, Sarah's mind raced. They were out of time. Zathorian reinforcements would be on their way soon, and they needed to strike fast. But as they approached the engine core, an unexpected problem emerged. "Trap," one of the soldiers hissed. "It's too quiet. There's no sign of patrols." "Don't get cocky," Sarah muttered. "Move forward. We're on a tight timeline. Whatever they're planning, we can't afford to let it happen." Back on the Valhalla, Alex stood rigid in his chair, sweat beading on his brow. The countdown had begun. The shuttle was inside, but he didn't know how long it would take for the crew to accomplish their mission. If they succeeded, they'd cripple the Zathorian flagship, perhaps even the whole fleet. If they failed, humanity's best hope for survival would be gone. Seconds felt like hours. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "Captain, we've reached the engine core," Sarah's voice came through, sharp and urgent. "We're planting the charge now. Get ready to move." "Good. I'm with you all the way," Alex replied, feeling his grip tighten on the armrest. "Don't stop. We're going to make them regret ever underestimating us." The message from Sarah was clear. There was no turning back now. They were on the edge of success, and the Zathorians were about to discover the truth about humanity. They had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. As the explosive charges were set, a deep rumbling shook the Zathorian flagship. Then, in an instant, a bright flash of light tore through the ship's core, signaling that the engine had been disabled. The Zathorians had lost their advantage. Alex's eyes gleamed with fierce satisfaction. "Now," he said, his voice filled with purpose. "Now, we finish this." Climax. The explosion from the disabled Zathorian engine core sent shockwaves through the flagship, rattling the hull with such force that the entire ship seemed to groan under the pressure. The Valhalla had successfully destabilized their target, but the true battle was only just beginning. The Zathorian fleet, once poised to crush humanity beneath its heel, had been forced into an unanticipated vulnerability. The Valhalla had done what no one believed possible. They had struck a blow to the heart of the Zathorian Empire. Alex Marlowe stood at the command chair, his knuckles white from gripping the armrest. The bridge was alive with activity as crew members worked feverishly to exploit the Zathorians' moment of weakness. He could feel the adrenaline in the air, a tangible force that thrummed through the crew like a shared heartbeat. "Captain," Sarah Diaz's voice rang out over the comms, her tone urgent but steady. "We've done it. The engines are down. The Zathorians are scrambling to regroup, but they're vulnerable. Now's our chance." Alex's jaw clenched. This was the moment. The moment he had known would come, but never dared to hope would arrive this quickly. The Zathorians had underestimated them, and now they would see what it meant to face humanity's resolve. All hands, prepare for a full assault. We strike hard and fast. We take them down now, Alex commanded, his voice filled with a quiet fury. It's our turn. As the Valhalla broke free from the asteroid field, the first volley of missiles launched from the Zathorian fleet came flying toward them, a deadly cascade of energy and destruction. But this time, the humans were ready. They had anticipated the Zathorian reaction, and as the missiles neared, the Valhalla evaded them with practiced precision, using their superior maneuverability to make the Zathorian strikes miss by mere inches. Shields holding at 75%, one of the officers reported, voice tight with the effort of maintaining their defensive stance. Alex's eyes never left the view screen. The Zathorian flagship, crippled but still fighting, loomed ahead like an injured beast, desperately trying to bring its remaining weaponry to bear on the Valhalla. But it was clear. The Zathorians were no longer in control. Target their primary. Weapon systems, Alex ordered. I want every one of those cannons silenced. The Valhalla surged forward, weapons hot and ready, and they unleashed a brutal barrage of fire. Explosions rocked the Zathorian flagship, shaking it to its very core. For a moment, the Zathorians struggled to retaliate, their damaged systems slowing them down, their once imposing ships now flickering with signs of distress. They're breaking, Sarah said, her voice a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. Captain, they're retreating. Alex's lips curled into a thin smile, but it didn't last. Something felt off. Too quiet. Too sudden. The Zathorians might be retreating, but there was always the possibility of something far darker lurking in their desperation. Stay sharp, Alex warned. They may be regrouping for one last push. And then it happened. A dark shadow flitted across the Valhalla's sensors. A Zathorian warship, far larger than the others, emerging from the far side of the fleet. This ship was unlike anything they had encountered before. Its sleek, menacing silhouette was followed by an eerie silence. The Valhalla's sensors couldn't detect any weapon signatures, but the sense of danger was palpable. Captain, it's an ambush, Sarah shouted, her fingers flying across the console. They've been planning this the whole time. The ship's hull suddenly lit up with energy, and from its belly a massive energy beam lashed out, straight toward the Valhalla. The entire bridge shuddered as the beam struck their shields, splintering the force field and causing the ship to stagger in space. Shields failing, 60%, an officer shouted. All hands brace for impact, Alex ordered, his voice booming over the chaos. Prepare evasive maneuvers. But the Zathorians were too fast. The newly arrived warship's weapons were unlike anything the Valhalla had faced before. Massive railguns fired in quick succession, each shot powerful enough to rupture their defenses. Alex watched as the energy beams tore into the Valhalla's hull, sparks flying, alarms blaring. For a moment it seemed like they might not make it. Captain, we've lost power to the secondary engines, one of the officers shouted, his voice desperate. We're drifting. But Alex refused to give up. There was no surrender, no retreat. The Zathorians thought they had won, thought they had finally broken humanity. They had no idea how wrong they were. In the heart of the Zathorian, Flagship Sarah and the boarding team worked quickly to plant their final charges. The corridors were eerily silent as they made their way through the heart of the ship, the alien technology around them, a dark reminder of the overwhelming power they were up against. They had done their job, but now they had to make it out. Charges are set, Sarah said, panting as she checked the last of the detonators. We need to move now. But as they turned to leave, the unmistakable sound of Zathorian soldiers echoed down the hallway. Their footsteps were fast. Too fast. They had been cornered. Get ready, Sarah whispered. We don't have time to fight. We need to move now. But the door to the exit had already sealed behind them. The Zathorians were playing their final card, and there was no way out. Back on the Valhalla, Alex's mind raced as the ship's systems began to fail one by one. The Zathorians had outsmarted them, just for a moment, but he knew it wasn't over. Humanity had something the Zathorians would never understand, the will to survive, the refusal to give up. He stood firm in his chair, watching as his crew fought to keep the ship afloat, to keep humanity's dreams alive. It was in moments like this, when everything seemed lost, that humans found their greatest strength. They weren't the strongest species or the most advanced, but they were relentless. "Get me a clear shot," Alex growled, his voice filled with renewed resolve. "We're not finished yet." In the final moments, as the Zathorian flagship loomed closer, the crew of the Valhalla took the shot. A well-timed blast from the forward cannons struck the Zathorian ship's energy core. The result was instantaneous, an explosion so powerful that it tore through the flagship's hull, rupturing its fragile defenses and sending the ship into a fiery spiral. The Zathorians, once so sure of their victory, were now in disarray. Their last-ditch effort had failed, and humanity's tenacity had won the day. The Zathorian fleet, now leaderless and broken, began to retreat in disorganized chaos. "We've done it." Sarah's voice came over the comms, filled with awe and disbelief. "They're retreating. We've won." Alex exhaled, his heart still racing. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. They had taken a beating, lost valuable crew members, and faced down the edge of annihilation. But in the end, humanity had done what it always did: survived. And now, the Zathorians would know what it meant to face the indomitable spirit of humankind. The aftermath of the battle was a hollow silence. The Valhalla hung suspended in space, its once pristine hull marred by scars from the vicious conflict. But it was still there. The humans had survived, against all odds. Around them, the shattered remnants of the Zathorian fleet drifted, their vessels crippled, broken. The once feared empire was in disarray, scattered and retreating into the far reaches of their space. On the bridge of the Valhalla, the crew had fallen into an exhausted calm. The air was thick with the weight of their victory, and yet, it felt like anything but triumph. The cost had been too high. Too many lives had been lost for this moment. Alex Marlowe stood at the command chair, his gaze fixed on the star field outside. The vastness of space stretched endlessly, a reminder of how much humanity still had to face. They had won today, but the war had taken its toll. He could feel it in his bones, the strain, the fatigue, the sorrow of the crew who had fought so hard, only to find that the true cost of survival wasn't just measured in battles won. "Captain," Sarah Diaz's voice broke the silence, sharp but soft at the same time. She stood next to him, her eyes somber as they both took in the damage to the ship. "We did it. We stopped them." Alex didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were elsewhere. He had spent so many years leading his crew into battle, always with the knowledge that survival was never guaranteed. But today, for the first time, he felt a weight pressing down on him. The cost had been too high. Too many people had given their lives for a victory that, in some ways, felt hollow. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low. "We stopped them. But we lost a lot to get here. We need to remember that." "Captain," one of the officers spoke up, "we've received a transmission from the Zathorians. It's unusual. They want to talk." Alex's brow furrowed. "What are they saying?" "They're requesting a ceasefire," the officer continued. "They want to negotiate." Alex paused, his thoughts swirling. The Zathorians, the empire that had nearly destroyed humanity, were now reaching out for peace? It made no sense. But then again, nothing had made sense since this battle began. He turned toward Sarah, his expression hardening. "Prepare to open a channel," Alex said. "Let's see what they have to say." The Zathorian representative appeared on the screen, the towering alien figure on the other side of the comms. Its face, angular and cold, was inscrutable. The alien's eyes glowed faintly as though reflecting the sheer magnitude of its species' shock. "Captain Marlowe." The Zathorian voice was cold, but there was a certain weariness in it now, something that had not been there before. "The Empire underestimates you, human. We have failed to crush your spirit, and now we seek to understand." Understand? Alex repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. After everything you've done, now you want to understand? The Zathorian leader remained silent for a moment as though weighing the words. We have miscalculated. We believed your species would crumble, that you would surrender to our might. But you did not. You fought. No, you survived. And now, we wish to learn from you. Alex's mind raced. This was no longer just a military conflict, it was something else, something more complex. The Zathorians were reaching out not just because they had been defeated, but because they had realized something that humanity had known all along. The strength of the human spirit wasn't to be underestimated. Why now? Alex asked. Why ask for peace when you had the chance to finish us off? What changed? The Zathorian's eyes narrowed. Our empire is fractured. Your resistance has shown us that our assumptions were flawed. We thought our power was enough to control the galaxy. But your species, you do not give up. You fight with a ferocity we have never seen. And that is something we respect. It is something we seek to understand. There it was, the truth. The Zathorians had learned the hard way that power wasn't just about size or weapons. It was about spirit, about the will to survive. And that was something humanity had in abundance. We will discuss terms, Alex said, his voice firm. But know this. The moment you break our trust again, this will be over. You don't get a second chance. The Zathorian bowed its head slightly, a gesture of respect, but Alex could see the weight of defeat in its posture. The war was over. The Zathorians had lost, not just in battle, but in understanding. They had thought their dominance was absolute, but humanity had shown them otherwise. Understood, the Zathorian leader said. We will proceed with negotiations. We seek an alliance. Alex looked around the bridge, seeing the exhaustion and weariness in the eyes of his crew. They had fought hard, but now, they had to decide what came next. The galaxy would not be the same after this. They had struck a blow for survival, but at what cost? Was peace worth it if it meant compromising with the very beings that had sought to exterminate them? Open the negotiation channels, Alex said finally, his mind made up. Let's end this war. Hours later, the negotiations were underway. The terms were difficult, complex. There were still deep-seated grudges to work through, distrust to overcome. But Alex knew this was the beginning of something new. The Zathorians were no longer the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy. Humanity had proven that. As the Valhalla continued its mission, its crew began the long process of rebuilding, both physically and emotionally. They had fought a war and won, but victory had left its scars. The cost of survival would always linger. Alex stood on the observation deck once more, looking out at the stars. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had made its mark. They had fought for survival and had come out on top, not because they were the strongest, but because they would never, ever give up. Captain, Sarah said, joining him at the window. What now? Now, Alex said, his voice steady, we rebuild, and we make sure the galaxy knows. Humanity never surrenders. The stars twinkled in the distance, each one a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the challenges still to come. Humanity had fought its first great battle in the stars, and it had won. But the war was far from over. The universe was vast, filled with unknowns, and there would always be new challenges on the horizon. But as long as humanity existed, they would never stop fighting. The future, uncertain as it was, would always be theirs to shape. And the Zathorians, along with the rest of the galaxy, would now understand one thing. Never again would they underestimate the power of human tenacity. The Valhalla floated in the heart of the galaxy, its once pristine hull now scarred from the brutal conflict. The stars outside shimmered like a million distant promises, but for those aboard the ship, the promise of peace was a distant hope, a hope tempered by the knowledge of what it had cost them to get here. The battle against the Zathorians had reshaped the galaxy, but the war was far from over. In the silence of space, a new chapter was beginning, one that humanity would have to write, just as they had always done, by their own rules. Alex Marlowe stood once again at the observation window, his eyes fixed on the stars. The faint hum of the Valhalla's engines vibrated through the deck, but it felt like a distant noise compared to the weight of everything that had happened. His mind was still reeling from the months of combat, the loss of crew members, and the intense toll that the war had taken on everyone involved. "How does it feel, Captain?" Sarah Diaz's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood beside him, arms folded, a somber expression on her face as she gazed out at the stars. She, too, had changed. The war had hardened her, but it had also brought her closer to understanding what it meant to lead in such uncertain times. Alex exhaled slowly, not taking his eyes off the view. "It feels like a beginning, not an end. We've got peace, but it's fragile. And we've got a long way to go before the galaxy accepts that we belong here." "Some will never accept it," Sarah said, her tone steady but filled with the truth of their experiences. "Some will always see us as a threat. But we've made our mark. No one will ever forget that humans stood up to the Zathorians and won. And maybe, just maybe, we've earned a place in this galaxy." Alex's mind wandered back to the Zathorian leader's final words. The once dominant empire had been humbled, their pride shattered by a species they had considered insignificant. Humanity had proven, through sheer force of will, that they were not to be underestimated. But that victory came with consequences. The Zathorians were not defeated. They were weakened, yes, but they were still out there, plotting their next moves. They would not forget what had happened here. "We'll be ready," Alex muttered, his voice a soft vow. "No matter what comes next, we'll be ready." The next few weeks were a blur of diplomatic talks, repairs, and countless hours spent coordinating with the Zathorians as they tried to rebuild their shattered empire. The negotiations were tense, difficult, and fraught with mistrust. The humans were no longer the underdog. Now they were a force to be reckoned with. The terms of the peace were complicated, and many factions within the Zathorian leadership remained unwilling to accept the new order. But humanity's tenacity had been noticed. Slowly, cautiously, the galaxy began to shift. Other alien species, watching from the edges, began to reconsider their stance on Earth and its inhabitants. Once viewed as a fledgling species destined for extinction, humans were now seen as unpredictable, fiercely resilient, and, most terrifying of all, powerful in ways the galaxy had never imagined. Alex found himself at the heart of it all, a reluctant leader in a new age of intergalactic diplomacy. He had not sought this role, but now it was his. The Valhalla was the flagship of Earth's fleet, but more than that, it was a symbol of humanity's will to survive, to adapt, and to thrive. As the Valhalla prepared for its next mission, Alex looked to the stars once more. They were no longer a distant, cold void. They were home, humanity's home. And though there was still much to fear, much to learn, there was one thing that the galaxy could never take from them: their spirit. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Diaz over the comms. "We've just received a message from the Outer Rim. There's been a sighting of a new alien species, a potentially hostile one. They've already made contact with the Zathorians." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The Zathorians may have been forced to recognize humanity's strength, but the universe was vast, and they weren't the only force vying for control. And now humanity had a new challenge to face, one that might even test their resolve more than the Zathorians ever had. "Prepare the crew," Alex said, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of apprehension. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." As the Valhalla powered up its engines and set course for the Outer Rim, Alex stood at the bridge, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges they would face. The galaxy was shifting. New alliances were forming. And there were forces out there, alien powers who would stop at nothing to impose their will. Humanity was no longer a pawn. They had proven that much. But proving that they could survive wasn't the same as winning the right to thrive. The screen before him flickered to life, showing the vastness of space ahead, dark, unknown, and yet filled with the possibility of new life, new dangers, and new allies. Humanity had won its first battle in the stars, but the war for their place in the universe had just begun. And as the Valhalla sailed deeper into uncharted space, Alex Marlowe couldn't help but feel that the greatest test humanity had ever faced was still ahead. They had made their mark, but it was only the beginning. Whatever the future held, they would meet it head-on. Because the one thing the galaxy would learn was this: humanity had only just begun to fight. And they would fight until the stars themselves knew the meaning of human tenacity.